Welcome to the Ordinary Marathoner podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Ordinary Marathoner podcast. My name is Coach Scott. I'll be your host today. Guys, I got a great show for you today. I got a great guest. Talked to her for quite some time. We're going to bring her in just a moment. As always, you can find this in the back episodes of our podcast at our website, ordinarymarathoner.com. You can also find them at most podcasting aggregators, places like Stitcher, TuneIn, iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, all that good stuff. If you're watching on YouTube, do us a favor, hit that subscribe button. It always helps us out. We really appreciate it. So thank you. So without further ado, I'm going to bring our guest in. She was the captain of Aid Station 6 at the most recent Ironman Lake Placid, Rhiannon Berry. Rhiannon, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Glad to be with you.
I'm so happy you agreed to come on the show. My daughter is absolutely in love with you. So, long story short, I met Rhiannon up in Lake Placid this past, it was a little over a week ago now. Mm-hmm. She was the captain of the aid station that me and my daughter, Sam is 12. We volunteered at the last minute. I've participated in Ironman Lake Placid 3 times. So it was time for me to give a little back. And, you always kind of run through the aid stations and you always thank all the volunteers. So it's kind of nice to be on the flip side of that. And Rhiannon was the captain of our aid station. So let me ask you this, Rhiannon. How'd you get that job?
Oh, gosh. So it's funny. I just started a new job here in the Adirondacks, and a woman whose desk happens to be positioned next to mine is Bethany Valenzi, the director of volunteers for Ironman Lake Placid. And she's just a magician and does so much work behind the scenes. So I would hear often the tail end of her phone calls, leading up to the race, and things about volunteers, things about COVID safety this year, things about groups that could or could not come because of travel restrictions. And it was very clear that a need was there. So I had originally intended just to volunteer this year. And that was it, just to have my few hours and then move on with my business, because I tend to be a busybody. If I'm not in the race, I am all over the race, spectating and cheering and giving as much enthusiasm as I can. And it became clear
this shocks me, by the way.
Yeah, I'm sure I'm very low energy. So Bethany had reached out to some people about, hey, I need some captains. And I was just like, you know what? I don't even know what I'm signing up for. And it's probably better that way. I have to say it's probably good. I didn't exactly know. But I'm so glad I did it. But yeah, she said she needed captains for either the bottom of the Keen Descent, which for those of you who are familiar, can bring all sorts of different circumstances. It's a fun part of the course, but it can also be a treacherous part of the course. So I was a little unsure about getting my volunteers in and out of that area, because that would be especially hard to navigate, and B, selfishly seeing a lot of unique outcomes, I'll say, because I don't want to scare anyone from doing the race. I wasn't sure. And then once she said, I need someone at the end of River Road, it was a no-brainer. The end of River Road, it's dark, it's lonely, it's quiet. There's no spectators that can come out there, and you're just by yourself with the other runners around you. At that point, not a lot of people are talking. You're mentally trying to stay in the game. So my thinking was, how cool would it be if we just had a party going for these guys? And when they got to our aid station, the music's bumping. It's a mile and a half by the time they come back to us, because the turnaround's right there. And it would just fuel them, to give them something to look forward to, because no one wants to get to the end of River Road except for the fact that it's the turnaround. But why not make it a joyous goal?
And, I tell you, I think you did an amazing job at that. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. But the one thing that absolutely shocks me from what you just said was that this was your first time doing this. This was the first time you volunteered or was a captain of an aid station. It just seemed like you knew what you were doing. Like you had everything under control. Everything seemed to be in the right place. The volunteers they knew what they were doing. As soon as we got there, you gave us jobs to do. Did they give you some kind of was that just you doing you, or was that maybe you having some experience from earlier in the day, since we kind of came in the late shift, or did they really kind of teach you how to do it before you even get out there?
I think it's a little bit of all of the above, if I'm being honest. So having experience in triathlon, in the racing portion of it, I have volunteered before. I have bumped around enough to see things that work and things that don't work. But really, I just kept saying it all day long. The volunteers that came to me, I would say 70% of which I did not know, had never spoken to, barely emailed with. They were just phenomenal. They were rock stars. I mean, look at Sam, your daughter, Kona Sam, as I call her. She's going to be in Kona someday, man. I'm telling you. Such a great kid. But yeah, she was a pro. You know, she was in it and she was handling her station. She's 12 years old and she's rocking it out. And I think it's one of those things where the energy of the moment fuels you. The rhythm of everything fuels you. You've got people on either side of you, people constantly checking in on you. You're checking in on each other. And I think once you realize you're not the lonely man on the island and this isn't all on you, it just takes a lot of the stress and the pressure off. And things were not smooth initially. There were some changes that were happening. Our biggest surprise of the day, and it could have been one of those things communicated and I didn't hear it or I forgot about it or something, but I feel like this would have been pretty memorable. They had some course changes this year, especially on the run course. That being said, runners always come through that course with aid stations on their right shoulder, just like you would drive. So you run on the right side of the road, you do your U-turn, and you come back on what is the right side of the road for you. So the pro's coming in and he's coming around a bend. We're all excited. We're, shaking our bells. We're screaming. And as I'm looking at him, I think, oh my God, I think he's on the opposite side of the road. What the heck is happening? And we were not positioned with our tables to do that. And what was amazing is this individual runs so incredibly fast. And we have full tables filled with drinks, filled with food, filled with everything you can imagine. And these people whom I've known for maybe 90 minutes at this point, everyone just listens to me barking out directions of this has to go here and this has to shift here. And everyone just picked it up. And it was like this perfectly executed, almost like a
ballet
band. Yeah, something like just the formation, the perfect lines. And it just worked. And by the time he came back, it was like it had been there all along in the right direction. But that really, really threw us for a loop. We did not see that coming. But yeah, Bethany is just so good about explaining all the information she has as she has it. I had a lot of seasoned captains that gave me their number. They were so happy to tell me what I needed to do. And this guy deserves mentioning, two of them really. Dan Cash, who's a local in the Lake Placid region and one of my colleagues, he had been a captain for years. And so he and his wife, Amanda, met with me, sat with me. We went over to-do lists, tips and tricks. I learned about what's the best way to load and unload, what's the smart way to have things stocked, what's the dumb way to have things stocked where you're just going to give yourself a problem. And also a friend of mine from Syracuse, my hometown, Eric Bonsbach, Mr. Coconuts, as we called him. If you saw him, you remembered him. It's hard to miss a man over 6 feet tall in a coconut bra and a tutu. So he brought... But Eric was fantastic. He has volunteered so many times in the Ironman. And for him, he knew the drill. He knew what needed to be done for something that long, whereas I had never done what would inevitably be a 14, 15-hour shift. So those two guys, Dan and Eric, were just remarkably helpful, definitely mentors. I would not have been able to make it as smooth without them.
Yeah, you couldn't do it by yourself, but you definitely had some good help out there. It just, it's funny because you think about it, that's just one aid station. That happens across all, right? That sort of situation happens across all of them. It's very kind of hectic, and especially in a race like this where so much is on the line for these athletes. And you said you've done it before, so you understand exactly kind of what's on the line for everybody and how you can most likely contribute to their race. And typically every runner that comes in is very thankful. I don't think I've ever had a day where I've been thanked so much in my entire life than that day.
Yeah.
But you screw something up, you could be a detriment to their race as well. And you don't really think about that too much, but
Right.
you like not to think about it. How many times have you competed in an Ironman event or distance triathlon? And, how did your experience doing that relate to the job that you did out there this past week?
So I have personally participated in 2 full-length distances in 2017 and 2018, both at Lake Placid, which has always been my home from home, and now it's actually my home, which is pretty terrific. But I've been involved in triathlons since, 2011, I think I started. I didn't know how to swim. I hadn't ridden a bike since I was 15, and I was like, hey, this will be a fun athletic challenge. I need something new now that college sports are over. And I fell into it. And the program I was brought up in was led by a man who has passed away tragically from a heart condition during a run. He just suddenly passed away, but his name was Brendan Jackson. And anyone who knew Brendan just carries him with you wherever you go, because he was the most motivating human being I've ever met, but it was genuine. He saw you in the depths of your soul. He saw your demons, he saw your successes, and he gave you the opportunity to face your own demons without criticizing them, and being gentle with them, and seeing everything as room for improvement. Like, hey, I'm really bad at this. What can we do with that? How can we nurture that? Or this is the part of Ironman that freaks me out. And I remember Brendan, especially when he was working with a variety of Ironman athletes, whom I also got to work with, it was often, everyone forgets about River Road. Everyone's so focused on that big hill going up by the ski jumps. Everyone focuses on, the Lisa G's hill or the Subway hill or whatever that hill is called. And if you don't have that mental space prepared for River Road, especially the back section of River Road where it is so dark and lonely, it's going to be a long day. You've got a couple 10Ks essentially happening on that section. That's a long time. So Brendan really mastered the art of, no matter how tired he was, or no matter what kind of a day he was having, or no matter how injured he was, or down he was in a workout, or busy he was with his schedule, he just found it. He found that extra something to give to others, and they fed off of him. And everything that I do is based from him. Everything that I have as a mentor, as a coach, as an athlete, is really coming from working with him so closely and being training partners with him, and him being my dearest friend ever. And any athlete that's worked with him carries that same testimony, I guess, to his legacy coming forward. 2 of the women that you saw immediately dive in to help an athlete that we had go down from dehydration and hypothermia, those were 2 of Brendan's athletes. Those were 2 women from my program. And you just see that there's a selflessness and a genuine feeling of love, giving, compassion, empathy, but also this refusal to stop believing in hope and stop believing in more. He always says, he always would say, you are so much stronger than you think you are. And he always told us, once the body starts to shut, or once the mind starts to shut down, start thinking, oh my gosh, my body is so exhausted, you're now just tapping into your reserves. So I think about captaining, and I thought about, wow, this is going to be constant. It's going to be constant noise, constant music, constant motion, constant orchestrating, operating, delegating. How can I do this, keeping up the enthusiasm that the athletes desperately need for the end of the evening, while also taking care of my volunteers and making sure they're fed, making sure they're hydrating, making sure they're getting off their feet, which Sam refused to do until she quite actually couldn't stand anymore for a bit. She was committed. But I think just all of that, just working with Brendan, the program I was with, being the athlete, knowing how important it is, understanding what it is like to be seen when you are in that moment of kind of depth and despair. And there's just no other option. because I think, oh man, I'm tired. I've been out here for 14 hours. Well, they have too, and they've moved many, many, many more miles than I have.
Yeah. It was funny. I was thinking about that when I was thinking about how we're going to frame the podcast. And I thought, maybe there's 20,000 people in Lake Placid that weekend. And 2,000 of them probably worked harder than you, but then there's you. you're like next after all the athletes, then which is still, I think, it's a very impressive thing to do. But I think it's kind of interesting about, so he was sort of a mentor to you in that way. And even though he's not here, you could still sort of have his spirit kind of guide you into doing, I mean, I don't know if we've even really explained it as much as needed, but I mean, you were out there in your tutu and your rainbow socks and your right. You had the neon
I had a
vest,
glow vest on at that point because it was dark. So yeah, I had my running glow vest on.
And so what it's like out there. You know what it's like to compete in one of these things. And man, I tell you, you go to that last turnaround. And one of the things that I would say to a lot of the runners was like, you're half a mile from the turnaround. And then once you turn around, you're going back and that's it. Like you're just on your way home. You're done. Mm-hmm. You're done. And I think it's a very important place because it's just that turnaround, I think, is so substantial and sort of symbolic to that's it. Like you're turning around and you're going back to town. There's no other way to go. Like you got to go there anyway. You might as well run or walk or whatever you're doing at that time. So I think it's a really important place to be. And for you to be out there, my daughter said, she's 12 and she's like, I wish I could have that kind of energy. Like how could she do that? Cause you were out there dancing with Eric and really kind of, but like when you're running in those things, like you might not even see the aid station because it's dark and it's in the distance, but you might be able to hear it. Mm-hmm. And that kind of like reels you in. And I think it's just a very important place along the course. As I would bet that by the way, I ran it. I did it in 2017 and 2018 as well. Although I did DNF in 18.
It was a tough year.
Yeah. Well, I was out of shape.
No, I was hypothermic. I probably should have DNF. It was not a good year.
That one. But yeah, no, I got on the Keen descent and and it was in the pouring rain. It was frightening. It was actually really frightening that year. Yeah. But you did also mention that you didn't want to be at the bottom of the Keen descent because of potential issues and it's frightening going down on the bike, especially if you don't have a lot of experience going down really steep hills. Mm-hmm. And I've done it 3 years now total. I've been down that descent a bunch of times and I've seen some things that seemed a little bit dangerous. And mm-hmm. I get it. But we did, and like you also mentioned, we did have a moment, like a little bit of a health crisis there of our own. And, we talked about it a little bit over email afterwards. But I think we really, you think aid station, volunteer, I'm handing out water, and then all of a sudden there's a health situation. And really, we're at the end of an Ironman. This isn't like a super shock, but it's not something you really want to have happen. What do you remember? I mean, I think that we really did our best. It worked out. It worked out for everyone. The guy who had trouble is okay. So we get that, but what, how are you reacting in that moment? And, if you can give us a little sort of play by play, about what happened.
Yeah. So, it's important to know in terms of my background, I am just coming off of a wonderful, beautiful teaching background. At a large school, had 250 kids per year. And there was just always a lot happening. And you always had to be prepared to respond to anything. And especially in these last, decade, maybe even since the 90s, the idea of, an emergency happening in a school and you have to respond quickly and you have to respond under stress. You have to respond under fear. Those are very real things. So it's interesting when a crisis comes my way, how quickly I feel calm. And later I can go through the holy crap moment. Like that could have been really bad. But in that moment, the brain thinks, oh gosh, something is going on. And it's just, all right, I'm in charge. What do I do here? So I was told we have an athlete that just needs someone to come check on him. He's not doing too bad. And I couldn't really see where he was from my vantage point yet. I sent out the message and then all of a sudden I see this man laying on the ground with his feet up on another athlete who we definitely need to mention at some point today. Just making sure his feet were elevated, and 2 women I had known from Syracuse tending to him. And, I immediately rushed over and just asked, what's the problem? And just trying to get the exact details of what was happening. And the man who was helping him, thankfully, had a medical background, which proved really, really fortunate in that moment. But he said, he's clearly dehydrated and he clearly is having hypothermia. So I just held his hands, completely white, completely ice. He had a very low body fat content, very, very fit guy. He's on his second loop and finishing
out. Right?
Yep, trembling. And his eyes were closed, but he was completely lucid, which was great. And the fact that he was coherent was good. His breathing was really, really quick. So I've had asthma since I was 5. It's something I've had to manage in many circumstances. And I know the most important thing is to control your breathing as much as you can. So that was my first thing. Talk to him gently, talk to him quietly, and really have him focus on breathing in the nose, out the mouth. And every once in a while, I would say, ask him about his wife, whose name is Sarah. Ask him where he's from, North Carolina. Ask him, do you have any kids? They have 2 kids. And after every answer, I'd be like, oh, that's great. Tell me more. He'd tell me something. And I'm like, great. Now just take a breath in and take a breath out for me. So he would do that. Then I'd ask another question. It's, hey, let's get a couple breaths. At one point when the medics had just arrived, there were like 2 rounds of medics that came. One was like the, golf cart quick response. And then the ambulance was coming and did get there. But the quick response realized his blood oxygen levels were really low and they were getting him an oxygen breathing machine. And his breathing changed all of a sudden. It changed and became very raspy, very tight, a lot of struggling, and you could feel the muscles working against them. And so he's putting his head up. I'm seeing his neck pulsing really hard from trying to get air. So now all I'm thinking of is Brendan, who dropped dead in a run and died. That was it. Just dropped and died. And I'm just thinking, like, not today. Like this is not happening today. So we told the medics, like, you got to get here as quick as possible, which obviously they were. But in the moment, that's what you're saying. Like, hurry up. It's got to be.
It feels like it takes forever.
It does. Really does. Yeah. But he was really struggling. And the biggest thing was just, okay, I need to stay calm. He needs to stay calm. And I don't know how the others involved who were in it, they just knew like only one person can talk at a time. And for some reason, he and I had that connection to speak, and they were taking care of everything else that they could. And I just really tried to keep him calm, to get as much air as he could. But then we realized with his head propped up a little bit, he was getting better air. So I like worm wiggled my body underneath his head. And then he started laughing while he's really not suffocating, but having this pretty emergency moment, and said, oh God, no one take a picture. My wife will kill me. And he's laughing. We're all laughing now. But I'm like, how are we laughing in this moment? This is a pretty serious moment. And for some reason, everything just changed. His breathing came back. His blood oxygen went back up to like 99 at that point, which is pretty insane considering his condition. And he was just worried about, can I continue? What can I do to continue? And they all looked at me and I'm like, let the medics look at you. They'll examine you. And if they take you out, it's going to be for a good reason. They've seen people in all sorts of conditions here. So if they're saying you cannot continue, there's a substantial reason. And laying on the ground for a bit, there's something else going on. But I knew that he was done that day.
Yeah.
And when they told him, I just felt him shatter when they said, you're off. And I immediately just started talking quietly to him in the same way that, Brendan would have talked to someone else. This doesn't define you. This in no way defines you. You are on the last 6 miles of your loop and it is not even 8 o'clock yet. This is your first Ironman. And he said, I worked so hard. And I said, you did. And this doesn't undo that. And you get to be mad, you get to upset, but you are not a failure. And we just kept having that conversation, and the medics just let us talk. And then they took him, gave him IVs, warmed him up, and he was great afterwards, So I haven't heard from him since, but I was told by the medic he responded really, really well to treatment, and that's good news.
Yeah, I'm thinking he'll be back. I'm thinking he'll be back at some point,
So.
and he'll give it another shot.
I hope so. I'm rooting for him.
It was, yeah. I mean, I came in a couple times and I was kind of hanging because I as a coach, I have to be CPR certified.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those where they do, and you've probably done these certifications before, where when you finish the certification, it's all fresh in your memory. So I did it literally like the week before, so it's all fresh in my memory. And I'm like, and I didn't want to like say anything. I didn't, but I was getting ready.
Yep.
you know. Yep. And especially the guy who came in 1755 was his number. I talked about him on my last podcast a little bit. I looked up his name, so I know it, but I don't know if he wants people to know. So I'm not, you know, if you want to look it up, they can look it up. But he was a total hero that day. Stopped his race and helped us out. And, you know, the things that I learned from the CPR course and training, I think the one thing that benefited this guy on the ground the most was that he held his legs up and got the guy in a comfortable position, probably helped the circulation. And at one point, the guy made a comment and he said, you know, I would love to tell you to please put my legs down, but it feels really good.
Yeah.
and at that point, and I'm like, you know, I think that little thing, just standing there holding the guy's legs up and talking to him and you know, having some sort of training and taking sort of, you know, handling the situation, it kind of put everyone at ease a lot. And I do think that without him there, who knows, you know, who knows what would have happened.
Absolutely. And he was so calm, and I could hear the athlete who was down getting concerned. You know, this is what I'm feeling. I don't think this is good. I don't know if I'm okay. And 1755 just kept saying, well, here's what's happening to you. This is a sensation you will feel. Here's what's happening. You're going to be okay. And just reminding him, like, you know, you're not going to die on us. Like, we've got you. And I don't know enough about medicine. I won't pretend to try to know. And I won't try to be inside his head to wonder, you know, did he actually mean all the things that he said, or was that, you know, bedside manner to keep him calm? But either way,
a Holiday Inn.
Yeah. It doesn't really matter at that point. Like, we have one job, and it's to take care of the person in front of us. But what blew me away the most about 1755? Well, not the most, because there's another thing which I'll add after. But I kept telling him, like, you can go, we've got him. He's like, and just so calmly, nope, I'm okay, but thank you. Another 10 minutes goes by. I'm like, hey, you know, I really appreciate your help, but it's getting cold and you're standing. You can go. No, I'm okay, but thank you. And he was just very calmly adamant, you know, I'm good. And it became clear he wasn't going anywhere. And the athlete who was down kept thanking him. And he said, well, you know, I think if our positions were reversed, you would do the same for me. And so I was like, oh, these guys are training partners. They know each other. They're from a same program. They had never met in their lives, I found out. They had never known one another. And I think this comes so full circle to questions you asked me before. You know, you're a volunteer captain or a volunteer or an athlete. How does it all translate? This sport has a remarkable knack for allowing people to connect and just understand needs, understand resilience, understand encouragement. You know, I played basketball most of my life. I was never on the court against my opponent saying, you're doing such a great job. That was such a great shot. I'm thinking, how can I ruin this woman's life for 40 minutes? That's what I'm thinking about. In triathlon, it's totally different. You are encouraging your opponents, you know, even if it's internally. So for the pros, like them blinking at us, that's extra effort, you know? So I don't know how much they're talking to each other out there, but it's just such a unique sport in that regard. And you are willing to go out of your way. You are willing to stop. And this is one of many, many stories from that day and from the existence of triathlon. You hear about this all the time. People stopping to help with a flat, people stopping to change a flat, people stopping to give someone nutrition, to give them their jacket. It's just such a giving community. And it's something I am just so drawn to. One other note about 1755, not only was he holding his legs up, but he was doing so while bent over at 90 degrees and squatting. I don't know if anyone has ever moved for 134 miles, 135 miles before squatting and holding it. that's pretty impressive.
Yeah. Yeah. And it just, again, also giving up his own race, just selflessly, and granted, he went and finished. I think I mentioned this in our emails, but I got back to my hotel and I was walking up the stairs and the door opened down the hall and some guy walked out and I said, "Hey, are you 1755?" He stayed 2 doors down from me at the hotel.
So crazy.
And he told me, he said, yeah, I knew at that point that I wasn't going to get the time that I was expecting anyway. So at that point, it really didn't matter. It was more important for me to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I also got the chance his daughter was there. So I get the chance to tell his daughter that, her dad was a hero, which I think is certainly not short of the truth. And just, like you said, we talk about this a lot. This topic comes up a lot on the podcast. This is podcast 430 something, but we've talked about this a lot. The sport, you think it's a race, right? And you think everyone's racing each other. That's what we do. We race.
Mm-hmm.
And so you'd think we'd be at each other's throats all the time, trying to beat one another, but it's nothing like that. It's always about support. And the race is always typically, you against yourself or you against the finish line and you to get a medal. And I think that a lot of people, sort of, I don't know, we relate to that with one another and it helps to cheer everybody on. Certainly you were out there doing a lot of cheering on Sunday night.
Absolutely. And that's just it. Like, it is such a unique sport. I grew up with basketball and soccer and track and everything was like overcoming your opponent and victory. And, yes, triathlon is that. And I think about people who are qualifying for Kona or trying to qualify for Kona, it's a whole different ball game for them. But what's so cool about this sport and all endurance sports, really, it's so tangible for your growth. A friend of mine who trained for Ironman with me back for the 2017 race, we were doing running intervals on an indoor track and we were totally different speeds, but we would just see each other in this indoor track. So it didn't really matter. We had the same concept of a workout. So, we're in it together and we would just talk afterwards about the little victories. And she said something I'll never forget. She said, I think the point of all of this is that something that sucked last week doesn't suck as much this week, but we've gotten faster so we can achieve that same level of suck. So it's a consistent level of pain. It's a consistent level of torture, but you grow and grow and grow along the way. And, there are bad days in training and everyone's afraid of a bad day. I know in basketball, if I had a bad day, that haunts you. For triathlon, it's like a badge of honor. Like, yeah, I was suffering that day. I was suffering. I was slogging. And then when you're not suffering and you're not slogging, you're so grateful to not be doing that. It's such a relief because you feel so much better, but also you grow to not fear suffering and you grow to not fear off days and you grow to understand off days are off days or off moments are off moments. They don't define your whole day, your whole workout, your whole life, as a person. And I know some athletes that do struggle with that. And it's such a tough headspace to be in.
I do.
Are you one of those? Yeah. And I tell people all the time, like you're so much more than a 50-yard interval. Like you've done so much more in your life. And they're like, oh, well, I screwed up. And yet another Brendan Jackson-ism, you did the best you could because if you would have done it better, you would have. So something went wrong. That's a learning moment. Like, this is cool. We can dig so much more from the mistakes. Maybe you went out too hard. Maybe you didn't pull hard enough or kick hard enough, or push your chest forward enough. Something's there. And now we get to fine tune that little skill. And it's just such a neat sport in that regard. And it does toughen you up for life in general. As cliche as that is, I am the least sports metaphor person ever. Anytime someone's like, life's a game, or you miss 99% of the shots you don't take, like, they're great quotes, but I see them and I just feel my stomach just twist. It's not for me. But now I'm like, life is like the uphill and the crest is coming, just adjust, or the water's choppy and just take care of yourself. Like, it's just so ridiculous, but it transfers into so many things. And I feel like endurance athletes have a steadiness to them, those long endurance athletes, because they know the bad moments are going to pass. They see it and they count on it. And when they don't, it's like, oh crap. All right, well, how do I re-navigate this space? What do I do with this space? And I just think that that pays off in dividends in all areas.
Right. And it's certainly, like you said, it is a metaphor for life in many different ways. And I think the sport itself, there's so many opportunities, I think, to grow within the sport and be better at different things, different disciplines, different parts of each discipline, nutrition, diet, all that stuff. Everything that factors into you being better at the sport, they're all learning opportunities, and it makes you, it may be physical, but it's also mental. It really does make you a better person, I believe.
Absolutely.
The training, the discipline, all that stuff. I mean, you want to finish one of these animal races. This is a beast. It's a beast of a race going out there for 140.6, but people do it. And I tell you, see people, different shapes, different sizes, different ages. But the suffering is the same.
yeah, that's just it. Like, and that's, people get so in their heads about stats. Like, I can't tell you how many times I hear the word, well, I can only blank. I can only bike 15 miles. I can only run a 12-minute mile. And then I'll hear people say, like, I can only swim a 115 per 100. I'm like, I have never done a 115, 100 in a pool, like, ever, and I never will, but I'm so pumped about my one-time 129. I'm so pumped about that. And the sport really teaches you to put things in perspective. And it's not a fun sport where in a field of 2,500 people, you get real sad when 1,200 people beat you. And you're like, oh, I'm 1,200 in first place and I am only worth that. And oh, if I suck. And I'm just like, those people, good for them. That's cool. They're having a killer day. I'm impressed. I'm cheering them on. And if I get to pass someone else who passed me, that's fun too. It's a fun mission to have. But yeah, that was just such a different thing than, the sports I played growing up, where my mindset, at least, because I definitely have an aggressive mindset, is, dominate. You want to be faster. You want to jump higher. You want to hit harder. You want to rebound better, whatever it is. You want to outthink them. And this sport, it's just you. What can I do today? And I can run the fastest mile of my life, but if someone out there is faster than me, there's not much I can do about that. But it's my own performance and not letting other people get into my head. And this sport, that never happens. If someone's having a great day, it makes me get better because I'm so jazzed seeing it that it's like fuel. It's like getting that gel, in your system. You just got some extra energy.
So one of the observations that I made, and I have an athletic background. I played football in college, up at Siena College, which is up in New York, not far from probably where you are. But one of the things so we used to kind of like listen to loud music before a game, or and try to really kind of get yourself psyched up. And even when I started running, I could kind of like do a 5K or a 10K and listen to music and get really pumped up. But one of the things that I found was that when you start doing like a 16, 17-hour race, that music is gone very quickly. A few hundred yards in the pool, and that sense of that, what you were talking about, like, the fierce competitiveness, you have to dial that down, and it has to go from this really, from being psyched for like this really intense moment to kind of draw that out. Did you? And it's funny because here we are talking about aid stations, and now we've brought this to this topic. And I don't think I've ever really kind of discussed it on the podcast, but it seemed appropriate given your comments. Did you find in your experience with endurance sports that fierce, intense competitiveness, is there do you find yourself having to kind of extend that or dial it down in order to kind of hold it for a long time?
Yeah, I think it's not even so much that you dial it down. It's just different. Like, everything has a time and a place. And it's just like, I recently had the conversation about the word love and how English has one word and there's other languages that have like 78 words for the word love, So I feel that way about being competitive. I have been described on more than one occasion as being quote unquote psychotically competitive. And something that makes me laugh about triathlon is I'm competitive. I like to do well. I like to feel the accomplishment, but I'm also not going to be running a 5:15 mile ever in my life. My hips won't allow it. My torn hamstrings and quads and God knows what else won't allow for that. That's never going to happen for me. And I'm not so psychotically competitive where I'm going to hurt myself trying to get those goals. On the same token, like you said, it's really hard to be psyched about anything for 12, 13, 14 hours. You know, you think music festivals, people sleep at those at some point. When it's an all day event, you got to go nap for a second, recharge, and get back out there. You just can't go the whole time. And I think for Ironman especially, there's a uniqueness to it because everything is currency. Your physical energy is currency and your mental energy is currency. Almost more importantly, your mental energy. So if you blow through the mental game and you're on hour 8 and you've got 4, 5, 6 hours left to go, that's going to be a long day for you. That's going to be a really long day for you. In 2018, I was hypothermic from the top of Keen Descent on the bike to the end of the entire bike ride. The sun never came out. I got caught in hail. My heart got stuck at 125 or below, which is not even close to where I'm supposed to be. Didn't know my name. I was falling asleep on the bike. In theory, should have pulled out, but didn't have the mental awareness or ability to make that decision. And the rest of that race, I had physical energy left, but my mental energy had been depleted because I was just willing myself through every single step of the rest of that race. I have never had to dig in so mentally deep for that long before. And I was broken for a while afterwards mentally. I was completely busted. Whereas the year before, I just had such a stable mental game, which is interesting because only months prior is when Brendan had passed away. And all of us that had been training were going through our own forms of grief and suffering. But we also felt really light that day. And we could just hear him in our heads, every single one of us, keeping us steady, keeping us calm. And I just feel like it's such a game of who's doing it smarter, not harder. You know, if you blow up anything in Ironman, you pay for it. And you pay for it for a long time, depending on where you blow it up. So the mental energy is just as essential, and getting to know yourself, being in your own head, not having that music is critical. People that train with music all the time, it's super helpful. And it does a lot for, you know, neurological response and muscle response. You kind of have this training in your head. And I have playlists running in my head all the time when I'm running by myself. But you also need to know those dark moments. You need to know, what do I think about when I'm that depleted? What am I thinking about when I am dying of heat stroke on this long, endless road? And I know I've got 2.5 miles before my next turn comes up. I'm out of water and there's no one here. What do I do to get through those moments? That is just as important for training as weightlifting, as swimming, as biking, as running, you know?
Yeah, I mean, all those things. And that's why you practice it. Sometimes I tell my athletes, it's not even, they'll have a bad run, they think. And then it's like, well, you've got the experience now, you know what it feels like when you're hitting that wall, and maybe there's a problem, and maybe you can, think about what it feels like, as you're approaching that moment. Was there any signs? Was there something that you could recognize so that next time maybe you put the brakes on a little bit, maybe get some water, get some nutrition, whatever it may be. But all that is experience, and you learn off of it. So all this experience now with this experience volunteering at the aid station as the captain at the aid station, what's next for you? It sounds like you still have some of that competitive juice in there.
Oh yeah. It's interesting, like everyone else in the universe, my life was paused with COVID. And I've been an athlete since I was 5. I've been going, to the little summer programs and just running around and playing knockout and dodgeball and tag and all that stuff and just feeding off victories. I had siblings that were athletic. I had friends that were athletic. So this has been a part of my life. So being forced to pause and to stop was really interesting. It was an interesting thing. And I had some different health things come up where I had to stop. And it really forced me to explore, what do I do with this other part of my time? And it's not even so much it helped me to regain a balance, because I do feel like between, teaching and writing and music that I'm involved with or was involved with and athletics, I've had a nice balance, and that has really helped me out. But when something is taken away, that's so yours. What do you do with that? So moving forward, it's interesting. I haven't lost the desire to race. And as competitive as I am, I always joke that I don't do triathlon to race. Racing gets in the way of my hanging out with my friends. It's something I'm supposed to do. And it is fun. It is interesting. It is, a success. It's a great goal. But I just like training with my friends. So not having racing in 2020, and then for medical reasons, not having racing in 2021, I've just been learning new things. So my fiance and I go mountain biking like crazy. I learned mountain biking from him. And it's just been this really awesome thing. And cross country skiing. So now it's, hey, I could sign up for another race, which I might do. I might do a half next year because we're going to get married next fall. So, yeah, I'm thinking about it. The Muscle Man, I was supposed to do.
I'm already in. So
maybe I'll see you. I'll see you there in some capacity for sure. And we have a friend, doing the Ironman next year, and it would be good to have that training support for them. And it is fun. I do miss it. So it's just kind of seeing what I can get cleared to do. I'm coming off a concussion, so I still can't run right now. So I'm waiting on that. Easing back into swimming. I've had 2 swims after not swimming for almost 18 months. Thankfully, somehow still remember how to swim. I did not expect that at all. But yeah, it's interesting. When you live in the Adirondacks, there's so much more than just the Lake Placid Ironman course, even though it is so iconic. So I even like the 46 high peaks. That's not something that calls to me. But I'm like, it'd be great to just explore and hike other areas more and to grow those parts of my athleticism, because I am severely lacking in that structural movement of hiking. For some reason, it kills me. Getting more into mountain biking. There's something here called the Over Easy, which is far from easy. It's psychotic, and it's all the single track in the Adirondacks under, 24 hours or 27 hours or whatever it is. And a friend of mine and I are like, you know what? We're out of racing a little bit. What if we did the Over Easy, but maybe in like a few days time, maybe not all at once, because that's just not where we are at right now. And we don't have the desire to commit to training for that intensely. Right. There's something here called Around the Park, I think it's called. It's a cycling loop around the entire center region of the Adirondacks. And I'm probably saying that wrong. So for you Adirondack locals, forgive me. But there's just so many different things you can do. So I love triathlon. It's given me the best people in the world. It's given me my best friends. It's led me to my fiance. It's led me to my new job. It's been there for me in the darkest of days. So I do love it. And I do want to stay involved in it. Do I want to do another Ironman? Maybe. I'm at a life point where, marriage, maybe having kids, which, it doesn't mean you stop things, but just for my body and my health stuff, I'm like, my body can only take so much stress. So just kind of seeing how life rolls out. It is in my head. It is something where I'm like, maybe. But even just the half, and I sound like a jerk saying just the half, but when your body has been pushed to such an extreme, something like the half, which is literally half the work.
Half's so nice.
Yeah, it's half, and it's not quite half the training, but you still have a little room. You're able to do more. And I often joke that there are such things called sprints and Olympics. They don't have to take hours and hours and hours. They don't have to commit every part of your day. But I do love it. And I'm really enjoying the cross training around here, which is something I didn't do for a while. I was purely swim, bike, run, lift, eat, sleep, work. And that was it, for training. So now, I've been off a road bike for a while, and I go back on, and mountain biking has given me watts I didn't know I had. I'm like, holy crap, this is so much smoother and so much fun. This is great. So it's just interesting to see how sports are translating. So I think that's actually one of my goals, is to allow myself the space, not so much to have more fun, because it's not that I wasn't having fun before, but to use other forms of athletics that work so many different parts of the brain and the body, and they give you so many different experiences, to allow those in and to do so graciously, and to not think I'm sacrificing in order to do that. Because at the end of the day, the mental health part of it and the encouragement to keep going is so important. You can burn out pretty easily.
Sure. Now, would you say that captaining an aid station is cross training?
Oh God, yeah. I was joking with people so many times. I've never officially done CrossFit, but I've done enough things similar to CrossFit in my training over the years, and especially with basketball. But I was like, I feel like I'm at a CrossFit training camp that's just not ending. You're picking up boxes of cola and of water and your ice, and you're slamming it down. You're flipping this and pouring that. And I was laughing the next day. I'm like, I'm pretty jacked today. My arms are pretty muscular. My hips were absolutely destroyed. I burned so many calories. My watch died around 8 p.m. and I had walked over 16 miles at that point. Wow. With a lot of the day just standing. So it's just nuts. It's nuts. And everyone says, spectating is harder than an Ironman. And it can be in many ways. Ironman is very systematic. It's clockwork. It's coming. You're prepared for it. You know what you're going to do. You're getting fed every so many miles. You've got people yelling your name, helping you out. No one's doing that for you as a spectator. And it is a long day. Time disappears. So I was there for 14 or 15 hours. I ended up leaving around 12:30 or so in the morning. I got there around 10:30. So whatever that math equates to, I think it's 14. You just go until it's done. You go until it's done. And being there at the end for the final athletes was really important for all of us, no matter who it was, what their situation was. And the final two women who came through our station ultimately didn't make it within the time, but they still were allowed to finish. And they're both just phenomenal individuals. And the 5 minutes you get to spend talking to someone, not even 5 minutes, it's amazing how well you get to know someone in that time. And, we've connected since then. I found them or they found me on Facebook, whatever it would be. And it's just really interesting how those connections can form.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really great. So we wound up leaving. I think we left the aid station close to 11 o'clock. Me and Sam was cooked.
Oh, yeah. She worked so hard.
She was just sitting there in the chair. She's like, I'm like, your aid station. She's like, I can't get up.
Yeah.
But at that point, we had consolidated anyway, and there wasn't so much to do. But I remember just walking out, and we were walking with some of the athletes that were finishing up. And one in particular was a friend of a lady we were standing next to all day. And she ultimately made it, which was really good because so cool. I guess she had tried before and she didn't make it. And this is her second attempt. So I love those sort of redemption stories of people who go at it again after they, instead of quitting, they're like, nope, I was so close. I'm going to go and do it again. And for her to make it, I thought was great. And Sam, all the walk down, I'm going to do this one day. I'm going to, and she's like, Dad, what's Kona? Cause you had,
I've opened up a new box for you guys. You're welcome.
That's all right. I've been trying to get her involved for a couple of years now, and dragging her out training when she's on her iPad is hard enough. But
right.
But anyway, I think that this being your first year, I mean, you found a calling here, I think, for yourself. I couldn't imagine the experience being any better as a volunteer. I just kind of showed up hoping to help. And, when we left, I thought it was an amazing experience for me and my daughter. And we just decided, we went up there thinking that, if they need somebody, we'd volunteer. And then we were kind of walking around trying to figure out how to volunteer. And we ran into someone named Enid who pointed us to you.
Oh, and, cool. Very cool.
Yeah. And it was kind of a little, I don't know, it was a little strange how it all happened, how it all came together. Cause we went down to the village to talk to the volunteer station, and they said we had to go online, and we went online. It was just really strange. And then we were like, they make it so hard to volunteer. And then we ran into Enid, and she made it a lot easier. And next thing I know, we were standing there.
Oh, that's so perfect.
We were standing there talking to you. And honestly, I think if I could handpick an aid station on the course, without even knowing who was there, I would have picked that one, because I just remember being at that last moment, like I said, at that last turnaround where you make that turnaround and that last bit. And I tell you, one thing that I think we should try to do for next year, if you're going to be involved, and I think I mentioned this in my email, is that you get to the end of that road and there's a turnaround and there's a light, and there was no one there. And
which is interesting. I didn't know that.
The last couple years I've done it, Yeah. So I get there pretty late at night when I do it. And there's been people there, not, one or two, not many, but
Mhm.
it's just like an affirmation. Like, I feel like, and there wasn't even a strip there. They normally have like a timing strip so that to keep
Mhm.
you honest, there was a guy standing there as a timing strip, maybe 200 yards ahead of the turnaround.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
not like you can cheat, but you kind of, I don't know. I felt like I was like, I don't know, it's very lonely, I guess.
Lonely, yeah, for sure, for sure.
And then they're making
Yeah,
a
it was
turn to go
interesting.
back. But we could do something, I think, out there. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway, if you are captaining that aid station again next year, Sam and I would certainly love to volunteer. We will be there with bells on,
Oh,
perhaps
perfect.
literally.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We had a woman in the first shift named Jade, and she literally had bells on her skirt. Would just do this little boogie shake anytime athletes came up, and they would just start cracking up.
So certainly, if you decide to do it, keep us on those emails. And
Absolutely.
I think it was a really worthwhile experience for me and for her, and we'd love to do it again for
Oh,
sure.
I'm so glad.
Any thoughts or considerations on whether you're doing it next year?
I don't. So it's interesting. I'm definitely considering it because the need is so there, and I do fit well into that role. And if athletes who are wanting to quit, I have that nugget I can say to them to see like, hey, is there a way for us to not have you quit? Since you medically don't have to, you're just done. Like, what can we do there? So that was a really unique part that I wasn't so much expecting. And I do know how important it is. The only thing that keeps me from maybe not wanting to do it is totally selfish. I missed being on the course and like getting in the action and being all over the place and seeing athletes multiple times a day. But then I remember, well, wait a minute, I'm seeing these guys 4 times a day. And I think if I were to do it again, I wouldn't be quite as all over the place. I think I would hopefully, one, have more volunteers because I would have more people as a basis time. And 2, I think I would feel a bit more organized, kind of knowing what to do, understanding things like you have to download a playlist before you get to River Road, or else you will listen to Tom Petty on repeat for 2.5 hours, the same song. I thought group 2 was going to lose their minds. And I love Tom Petty, but oh man. Yeah, I'm still scarred from that. And we had a techno song that I put on there as a joke. It was supposed to be a one and done thing. That was the other song looping with Tom Petty. So it was just like this incessant thing. So those are little things, you learn. And I think that would allow me to be a bit more involved with the athletes passing through rather than have my back to them so often. But I also recognize that that was what I needed to be doing at that point. Like all of you guys had the athletes in great hands. And that was the cool thing, that I could have my back turned. I could be in a truck unpacking boxes of Coca-Cola and knowing for sure that everything was running smoothly. And if it wasn't, people would help or ask the question. And that was very, very cool. So I'm definitely leaning towards it. But in some way, shape, or form, I would end up at aid station 6 on River Road in some capacity. But yeah, I'm leaning towards it.
Excellent. Well, if you're leaning towards it, then we're going to be leaning towards it. We've been going to that race this will be year 5. 3 years I participated, and then I'm not participating next year either. I've already got a full schedule, but plus I can't do that climb anymore. I don't want to do those climbs.
Build character. Come on.
But I'm thinking 23. So, and that would be great too, because if you're out there again for 3 years, to see the aid station, and by then you'll probably have my other daughter who's 2.5 now.
Hey, if she's got 2 hands that work and knows how to fill a cup, I'll take her.
That's right. We'll put her to work for sure. She needs.
That's right. Start training.
Anyway, I thought you did an awesome job. I think we just cut out there a little bit, but I thought you did an awesome job. And Sam really loved the experience, which was really important to me. So thank you from that perspective. One other thing too, I thought about this before and I just want to mention it. We did have one athlete come in late at night and asked to stop, and he sat down, and I don't know, I think you were there, and he sat down on the ground for a while. And he was going to quit. He just seemed like he was going to quit, that he had enough.
Yellow?
And
was he in yellow?
Green and yellow, I think.
Yeah.
And his name on the back too, I think.
Eddie.
Huh?
My guy, Eddie.
Eddie.
Yeah.
So he said something to me at first when he was going through, like he wasn't going to make it. And then I saw him like 2 minutes later. I'm like, oh, this guy didn't, I thought he was just going to go, but he didn't. He stood there, sat on the ground for probably close to 10 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And then the next thing I knew, he was gone and he came back the other way and he was running.
Yeah. It was
And he
so
was like,
cool.
I'm going to finish. I feel great. He's like, and he just thanked us so much for just like letting him sit there and kind of not talking him out of, getting transportation
Yeah.
home. And he all of a sudden just got, and that happens before. I've had that happen to me in races where I feel like I'm going to be done and you just take a little break and you breathe a little bit. And next thing you know, you got enough to finish. So, unlike that first story of the athlete that couldn't go on, that was at least a story where similar circumstance, not as much of a health emergency.
Right. But that was the thing. Eddie was one of my favorite moments of that entire day. And he and I have actually connected on Facebook. And he's like, my Ironman angel. Oh my God. He was wonderful. So yeah, he had been having a lot of issues coming up to where we were. It was his second loop. His body kept kind of failing on him. And that just tears you apart mentally at a late point in an already mentally taxing day. So I came over to talk. I think you were the one to say like, hey, we've got a guy pulling out. I'm like, all right, let me see what's going on. And he started talking to me and he was so clear and he was able to keep his body upright and he was able to keep his arm on his knee. And I'm like, well, you've got too much dexterity right now to be done. And I asked him what was going on. We talked about his day and it was clear there were no medical issues going on, which is the most important thing, obviously very depleted. But there was no hypothermia. There was no heart condition. There was nothing like that happening. So I remember him looking into my eyes and so genuinely asking me, why is this happening to me? Do you have any ideas? And all I could think was, I better come up with something feasible and possible for this man. He needs me. And we ended up talking about nutrition and he was listing everything at the nutrition tables he had tried everything. And the one thing he didn't mention was grapes. And grapes have a very particular glycemic index and glycemic load. And I'm like, I think the condition you're in, they're going to give you enough quick punch and enough slow release to maybe help you out. I'm like, you know what? Let's try some grapes. You've got like 2 hours to go 6 miles. I think you can do that, pretty easily. I'm going to get you some grapes. You hang out and just eat a few and just see how your stomach does. He's like, okay. So I check in with him. He's doing great. Eddie, well, why don't you try standing up? Okay, great. He stands up and he's like, I'm actually feeling kind of okay. And I'm like, so just hang out here a little bit more. Okay. And he's starting to believe in the grapes now. And I'm seeing him believing in these grapes. So I told him, listen, you've got 1.5 miles. I truly think you can make it at least 1.5 miles. Bring a big cup of grapes with you and just munch and just walk and just hang out. And in 1.5 miles, you're going to know, do you need to drop out? And if you need to drop out, like, we'll do it. But let's just see what happens. He's like, okay. And so all of a sudden, before I know it, he's taking off and he's yelling at me, I love grapes. He's like, I'm good. I'm going to check in with you when I come back. I've got it. I'll check in with you. And then I just hear this like burst of joy and gratitude from this glowing yellow jersey. I'm doing it. And he said a few things to me that were just so funny afterwards. But and he finished. He did it. Yeah. And it's just, it is a long day. And I am not throwing shade at him at all for thinking like, oh my God, I've got to take off. But it's amazing those moments where maybe a little bit of fuel, maybe a rest, maybe a sentence, something might be that thing that you need. And it just happened to work for him. But the joy and the movement I saw from him, just like galloping and just saying he loves it, was so awesome. He was so great.
Yeah, I'm glad I remembered that story because I didn't realize that you guys had that much of a connection. But
oh yeah,
it's nice to have when you have a guy that pulls out because of health issues, then to have another one where
right.
He was able to finish and do so with a really thankful and sort of joyous return from that turnaround. That was a good moment. It's like, I just remember even when I first decided to do my own first Ironman, watching the videos of people, the highlight videos, and back in the day where you pass out on the side of the road and they would just leave you there.
Yeah.
And then the guy would wake up and go finish.
Yeah. I'm glad I didn't participate during those days. Like those guys were, and the men and the women who were involved in those years, before the aero bikes, before the carbon, before the zip wheels, before, nutrition was really figured out, and they're crushing all of our times. It's just it's so awesome, but I just don't know how they did it.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Well, listen, thank you so much for coming on the show. I think I've already kept you. I looked down before and I was like, oh, a half hour, we can still talk. And then I looked down now, it's over an hour. So I knew we had the potential to yap for a while. But thank you so much for coming on. Thank you again for giving me and my daughter such a great experience out there volunteering. And like I said, I really do think that you found a calling here. Like this is, I don't know. I thought that your performer, we left and I said, I got to have her on the podcast. So I'm so glad. Thank you for coming on, Rhiannon, and reliving that day. I think it was a great one for you.
Absolutely. Thanks so much. And tell Sam, now that she actually knows what Kona is, now it's going to be even cooler when we call her Kona Sam.
Yeah, I'm going to have to buy her an aero bike or something like that. Thanks.
You're welcome. Get them started while they're young.
Exactly. But we're working on it.
Cool.
Thanks so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
All right, we're going to wrap it up there with Rhiannon Berry. Hopefully she'll be back again next year at Ironman Lake Placid, 8 Station 6, last one on River Road. I will be there. If you're there, I'm there. And we'll be having a party again out there next year. We'll be dialing up a notch too. I think we'll even 1 year of prep under your belt, 1 year of experience. I think next year is going to be amazing. So sign up for Ironman Lake Placid, get out there, and we'll see you guys out there on the road. We're going to wrap it up there. And remember, every day is an ordinary day unless you make it extraordinary. So get after it, guys.